At my daughter's engagement party, she hugged me, smiled for the photos, and whispered in my ear, "Dad, can you check him out? Just in case." That was the moment the music turned hollow. We were standing in the backyard of her fiancé's parents' house in Westchester County, New York. Late May. Soft yellow lights strung across the maple trees. A rented white tent. Catering from some farm-to-table place that charged $68 a plate. Champagne that cost more than my first car payment. Everyone looked happy. My daughter, Emily, looked radiant. 32 years old. A corporate attorney at a mid-sized firm in Manhattan. Calm, sharp, disciplined. She had always been the kind of child who triple-checked her homework and filed her taxes in February. She doesn't whisper unless something is wrong. I pulled back slightly and looked at her. She smiled for the guests walking past us. Then her fingers pressed into my arm. Not hard, just enough. "I probably sound paranoid," she said softly, "but something feels off." "What kind of off?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. Just check." Then she turned, lifted her glass, and laughed as if she hadn't just asked her father to investigate the man she was about to marry. His name, at least the name we knew, was Daniel Harper, 38. Claimed to work in financial consulting. Always vague about specifics. Said he handled asset restructuring for high-net-worth individuals. That sounded impressive. It also sounded slippery. He had met Emily at a charity gala 18 months earlier. They moved fast. 6 months in, he talked about marriage. 9 months in, he'd moved into her condo in Tribeca. 12 months in, he proposed with a ring that looked expensive but somehow felt strategic. I remember watching him that night at the engagement party. He was circulating. Not nervous. Not overly excited. Just observant. He shook hands firmly. Asked my brother about his commercial property in Connecticut. Asked my sister about her investment portfolio. Laughed at jokes. Maintained eye contact a little too long. And every time someone mentioned the family trust, his expression sharpened, just slightly. Most people wouldn't notice. I noticed things. I built my construction company from nothing in 1989. I survived 3 recessions. I've seen partners siphon money, suppliers inflate invoices, subcontractors disappear overnight. When you've signed payroll checks for 64 employees during a downturn, you develop instincts. Still, I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. After the party, I went home to my townhouse in Stamford and poured myself a bourbon. It was 11:47 p.m. I remember because I stared at the microwave clock for a long time. My daughter had never asked me to check on a boyfriend before. Not in high school. Not in college. Not in law school. She was not impulsive. She was not dramatic. If she felt something, there was something. The next morning at 6:15 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began. Basic search first. Daniel Harper. Financial consultant. New York. LinkedIn profile. Clean. Too clean. Only 7 connections listed publicly. Employment history going back 10 years, but no verifiable companies I recognized. The firms either had generic names or didn't appear to have much of an online footprint. Instagram. Minimal posts. Mostly scenic shots. Boats. Wine glasses. Airport lounges. No old friends tagged. Facebook. Sparse. I paid $29.99 for one of those background check sites. It showed nothing alarming. No criminal records. No bankruptcies. No lawsuits. If I had stopped there, I might have reassured her. But I've learned something about men who leave no mess behind. Sometimes it's because they clean very well. I called an old friend of mine, Tom Alvarez, retired NYPD, now a licensed private investigator. We'd played softball together 20 years ago. "Tom," I said, "I need a quiet look into someone. Future son-in-law." He laughed. "They all do. Not like this." There was a pause. "Send me what you've got," he said. Over the next 2 weeks, Tom dug. Meanwhile, I watched. Daniel came to Sunday dinner at my house the following weekend. He brought a $300 bottle of wine and complimented the hardwood floors. He asked about the value of the property casually. Stanford's market still strong? He asked while slicing his steak. Depends who's asking, I said. He smiled. Emily looked relaxed. Or maybe she was trying to look relaxed. Later that night, she texted me. Anything yet? Not yet, I replied. But Tom called the next morning. Your guy's interesting, he said. Good interesting? Depends how you define good. He'd run deeper searches. Cross-state records. Old business filings. Variations of names. Daniel Harper was clean. But a Daniel H. Harper with a different middle initial had dissolved a consulting LLC in Illinois 5 years earlier. And before that, a Daniel Harlan had registered a business in Nevada. Different states. Similar timelines. That's not illegal, I said. No, Tom replied. But patterns matter. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. I want access to his laptop. That's not happening. Not legally, no. But if your daughter's suspicious, she might have access. That was the first time I realized how serious this could become. I didn't want to spy on the man she loved. I didn't want to invade privacy. I didn't want to become the paranoid father who destroys a wedding. But I also didn't want to attend my daughter's funeral, financial or otherwise. That evening, I met Emily for coffee in Midtown. 6:30 p.m., corner table, near the window. Tell me everything, I said. She hesitated. Sometimes he asks detailed questions about the trust, she said quietly. About distribution schedules. About liquidity. He jokes about unlocking capital. He wanted to know if I could access funds before 40. Her trust, established by her grandfather, was worth approximately $4.2 million. Structured, protected, released in stages. Have you given him access? I asked. No. Has he asked for passwords? She shook her head. Not directly. Indirectly. Just hypothetical scenarios. I leaned back. Emily, if we look deeper, there's no going back. She met my eyes. I know. That was the moment my role shifted. Not from father to detective. From passive observer to quiet strategist. I called Tom the next morning. Let's dig until there's nothing left to dig. And that was how it began. The first real crack didn't come from a database. It came from a spreadsheet. 3 weeks after the engagement party, Emily called me at 9:12 p.m. Her voice was steady, but too steady. He left his laptop open, she said. I didn't speak. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was looking for the Netflix password. And there was a file minimized. It had my name on it. That's the moment your stomach doesn't drop. It freezes. What kind of file? A spreadsheet. Did you open it? Yes. Pause. And she inhaled slowly. It's labeled E, Asset Timeline. I closed my eyes. What's inside? She didn't answer right away. Dad, it lists my trust value. The condo. Your company. Aunt Maria's lake house. Estimated liquidation values. There's a column called Projected Access Post-Marriage. And another called 30-Day Strategy. The room felt smaller. Are you sure? I asked quietly. I'm looking at it right now. There's a specific kind of anger that doesn't explode. Calcifies. Send it to me, I said. She took photos with her phone and texted them. Grainy but clear enough. Line items. Dates. Dollar amounts. Her trust? $4,237,000. My construction company valuation estimate? $11 to $13 million. Notes in the margin. Prenup avoidance strategy? Emotional leverage via family expansion discussion. Encourage joint account before honeymoon. I laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes your brain short-circuits. Dad, she whispered. He has a tab labeled contingency. If suspicion. I stood up from my desk and paced. Close it, I said. Put everything back exactly as it was. She did. That night I called Tom. We met at a diner off I-95 at 11:30 p.m. The kind of place that smells like burnt coffee and old vinyl booths. I slid my phone across the table. He studied the photos. Jesus, he muttered. This is criminal. Identity confirmation. That's when Tom went deeper. Variations of Daniel Harper weren't enough. He pulled DMV photos from Illinois tied to Daniel Harlan. Similar face. 5 years younger. Nobeard. Then Nevada filings under Daniel H. Clark. Same birth date. Different social security number. That was when the pattern snapped into place. The man engaged to my daughter had at least 3 legal identities. Tom called me 2 days later. "I've got a marriage record," he said. My hand tightened on the phone. 3 years ago, Arizona. Woman named Linda Carrington. 59 years old. Divorced 18 months later. No children. Settlement. Sealed. That's never good. Then Tom found the fraud complaint. Linda Carrington had filed a civil suit alleging financial coercion and unauthorized asset transfers totaling $780,000. The case was dismissed after private settlement. The name of Linda's legal representative at the time? Paralegal named Vanessa Moore. Vanessa Moore now worked in New York, at a small estate planning firm. And here's the detail that made my skin crawl. Vanessa Moore had recently connected with Daniel Harper on LinkedIn. Emily and Rachel hired Tom officially at that point. Paperwork signed. Retainer paid. $12,000 upfront. This wasn't about paranoia anymore. It was about prevention. Tom began surveillance. He followed Daniel to a midtown office building twice. The firm directory did not list him. He wasn't employed there. He met Vanessa Moore for lunch on a Wednesday at 1:17 p.m. No visible affection. But they talked intensely. She passed him a manila envelope. Tom photographed it. Inside the envelope, later confirmed through trash retrieval, were copies of trust distribution schedules. Emily's trust. The one she had never shared with him. Rachel moved quickly. She filed a quiet protective notice with the trust administrator. No distributions without dual verification. No changes to account access. Emily pretended everything was normal. Wedding planning continued. Dress fittings. Cake tastings. A guest list of 214 people. Deposit paid. $42,000 to the venue in Hudson Valley. Meanwhile, Tom uncovered something that shifted this from financial manipulation to full conspiracy. Vanessa Moore had been disciplined 5 years earlier for procedural irregularities involving client documents. Not disbarred, but reprimanded. And 2 other wealthy women in Arizona and Nevada had married men with similar aliases. Both marriages lasted less than 2 years. Both ended in settlements. Neither pressed criminal charges. Pattern. Target. Exploit. Exit. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marry into money. Establish emotional trust. Push for early liquidity, investment opportunities, joint ventures, business expansion. Transfer assets into joint structures. File for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Walk away with millions. 30 days after the wedding, according to the spreadsheet. 30. Emily sat across from me one evening in my living room, the engagement ring still on her finger. "I feel stupid," she said quietly. "You're not," I replied. "I'm a lawyer. I read contracts for a living. You trusted someone you loved." She laughed softly. "He even cried when he proposed. Good actors rehearse." She looked at me for a long time. "What do we do?" I didn't answer immediately, because revenge can be loud, or it can be cold, and cold lasts longer. Rachel advised against confrontation. "If you tip him off," she said, "he'll vanish. Different name, different state. We need attempted action tied to documentation." So Emily did something that required more strength than any dramatic confrontation. She played along. She asked him hypothetical questions about merging finances. She suggested accelerating the honeymoon to Europe and discussing investment ideas. He responded enthusiastically. Too enthusiastically. Tom intercepted emails between Daniel and Vanessa using legal warrant assistance after presenting probable cause to a friendly prosecutor Rachel knew. The emails were careful, but not careful enough. One line read, "Once the ceremony is complete, timeline begins. 30 days max." That was the smoking gun. conspiracy to commit fraud. We had intent. We had coordination. We had documentation of asset targeting. All we needed was attempted execution. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday night. Private room at a high-end restaurant overlooking the Hudson. 40 close friends and family. Daniel planned to request joint account paperwork the following Monday, citing investment timing. He had already drafted documents. Tom photographed them during a brief window when Daniel left his laptop unattended at a co-working space. Joint account application. Beneficiary revisions. Power of attorney draft. Everything dated post-wedding. I remember the moment I realized we had him. Not with rage. With relief. Emily looked at me and said, "Let's finish this." Her voice didn't shake. Mine almost did. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for 7 p.m. By 6:42 p.m., the FBI Financial Crimes Unit had 2 unmarked cars parked across the street. You don't imagine that sentence being part of your daughter's wedding weekend. But there we were. The private dining room overlooked the Hudson River. Soft candlelight. Long oak table. 42 guests. Her college roommate. My brother and his wife. Daniel's business associates. His parents, who looked blissfully unaware. Emily wore a simple white dress. Not the wedding gown, just something elegant for the evening. Daniel stood at the head of the table, charming as ever. He raised a glass. "To new beginnings," he said. I watched his face. No sweat, no tremor, no guilt, just calculation. At 7:18 p.m., he leaned toward Emily and whispered something. She smiled. Later, she told me what he said. "After tomorrow, everything changes." He meant it. What he didn't know was that Rachel had coordinated everything down to the minute. The U.S. Attorney's Office had reviewed the emails, the spreadsheet, the draft power of attorney, the identity records across 3 states, the Arizona settlement, the Nevada alias, the documented plan referencing a 30-day liquidation strategy, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity fraud, attempted financial exploitation. They didn't need him to transfer the money. They needed proof he was about to. At 7:26 p.m., Daniel stood up again. "I just want to say," he began, "how grateful I am to join this family." The door opened. 2 agents stepped in quietly. The room froze. For a split second, Daniel smiled, assuming it was some mistake. Then one of the agents said his other name. Daniel Harlan Clark. That's when the color drained. There's a specific moment when a con man realizes the performance is over. His shoulders drop first. Then his eyes harden. Emily didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She simply placed her napkin on the table. Vanessa Moore was arrested at her apartment 30 minutes later. She had already begun drafting revised trust documents under false pretenses. The agents asked Daniel to step outside. He glanced at Emily. "What is this?" he asked softly. Her voice was calm. "You know exactly what it is." He looked at me then. For the first time since I met him, there was no charm. Just anger. "You think you've won?" he said under his breath. I leaned closer. "You should have picked a different family." He smirked faintly. "Even in handcuffs. That's the thing about predators. They don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as smart." The agents escorted him out. The restaurant was silent except for the sound of forks gently being set down. Daniel's mother began to cry. His father looked stunned. Emily stood up. "I'm sorry," she said to the room. "The wedding is canceled. No speech. No drama. Just truth." Someone near the end of the table muttered, "What the hell just happened?" My brother leaned over to me and whispered, "Well, that's one way to cut catering costs." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Sniffing. Dark humor keeps you upright sometimes. Outside, the flashing lights reflected off the river. Inside, guests began checking their phones as the news alert spread faster than the dessert menu. By 8:15 p.m. it was done. The man who planned to liquidate my daughter's life within 30 days was sitting in the back of a federal vehicle. The twist? He had already begun executing Phase 1. Rachel informed us that Daniel had opened a shell LLC 2 weeks earlier in Delaware. timed precisely to align with post-wedding. What he didn't anticipate was that Emily would trust her instincts before trusting him. Back inside the restaurant, guests slowly processed the shock. A few came up to Emily. "I'm so sorry. You're brave. Thank God you found out." She nodded politely. Then she excused herself and walked outside to the balcony overlooking the water. I followed. She gripped the railing. "I almost married him," she said quietly. "But you didn't." She nodded. "I keep replaying everything. The proposal, the vacations, the conversations. Con artists don't fake affection," I said. "They weaponize it." She laughed softly. "Great. I dated a weapon." We stood there for a while. The wind was cold, the kind that clears your head whether you want it to or not. Downstairs, reporters had begun gathering. Someone had tipped them off. Rachel handled statements. Active investigation. No further comment. Daniel and Vanessa were formally charged 3 days later. Wire fraud conspiracy. Identity theft. Attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, because they argued emotional manipulation counted. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, spreadsheets, alias documentation, financial modeling projections referencing specific trust milestones, and that 30-day plan, that arrogant, detailed, numbered timeline. What he thought was intelligence became his confession. The wedding venue refunded 60% of the deposit after reviewing the criminal charges. The caterer kept theirs. Small price. Emily returned the ring to the authorities as evidence. Turns out it was financed. Of course it was. The narrative shifted quickly in the press. High-profile fraudster arrested at rehearsal dinner. His previous victim in Arizona came forward publicly. Then another. Pattern confirmed. The coldest part of revenge isn't screaming. It's documentation. It's patience. It's letting someone build their own cage and simply closing the door. The morning after the rehearsal dinner felt unnaturally quiet. No florist deliveries. No makeup artist arriving at 6 a.m. No bridal music. Just sunlight through the kitchen window and the low hum of the refrigerator. Emily slept at my house that night. Not because she couldn't be alone, but because sometimes even strong people need familiar walls. She came downstairs around 8:30 a.m. in sweatpants and one of my old company t-shirts from 1997. The logo was faded, the fabric thin. She poured coffee. Black. No shaking hands. No tears. Just stillness. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded once. "I think so." Then she surprised me. "I'm embarrassed," she said. "Why?" "Because he almost succeeded." I leaned back in my chair. "He didn't. But he almost did." I shook my head. "Emily, if someone points a loaded gun at you and it jams, you don't feel stupid for being targeted. You feel grateful it misfired." She gave a faint smile. Sniffing. Dark humor again. The official charges were announced that afternoon. The U.S. Attorney's Office released a statement outlining the conspiracy. They detailed the aliases, the interstate operations, the coordination with Vanessa Moore. Daniel's real legal name was confirmed. Daniel Harlan Clark. 3 identities over 8 years. 2 prior civil settlements. 1 active conspiracy stopped before execution. Vanessa had already begun cooperating. That didn't surprise me. In schemes like this, loyalty ends where sentencing begins. Within a week, 2 more women came forward. Both had dated him under different names. Both described identical behavior patterns. Fast emotional bonding. Early discussions of financial merging. Subtle pressure regarding liquidity. Emily wasn't his first target. She was just the first to stop him in time. The fallout spread wider than I expected. Daniel's parents issued a public statement claiming ignorance. I believed them. You don't fake that kind of shock. The estate planning firm where Vanessa worked terminated her immediately. Disbarment proceedings began within days. Emily spent the following week canceling vendors. The venue, the band, the photographer. Some deposits were lost. About $68,000 total in non-refundable payments. People kept apologizing to her, as if she had failed. But she didn't look like someone who lost something. She looked like someone who escaped. Friends came by with casseroles. Why? Awkward hugs. One of her bridesmaids whispered, "At least you found out before the honeymoon." Emily replied calmly, "Exactly." There was something different in her voice now. Not bitterness. Clarity. Rachel continued working with prosecutors. Because Daniel had drafted power of attorney documents and initiated LLC structures tied to fraudulent intent, the charges escalated from conspiracy to attempted execution. Maximum sentence, up to 20 years. He eventually accepted a plea deal. 12 years federal prison. Restitution to prior victims totaling $1.4 million. Asset forfeiture. Turns out he wasn't as wealthy as he pretended. Most of his lifestyle was leveraged credit and previous settlements. Even the engagement ring had been financed under a short-term promotional line of credit. Emily found that detail absurd. "He literally proposed on installments," she said once, shaking her head. I couldn't help laughing. The press cycle faded after 2 weeks. Another scandal replaced it, but the personal aftermath lingered. Trust doesn't shatter loudly, cracks quietly. Emily began therapy, not because she was broken, but because she wanted to understand how manipulation works. She read books about narcissistic personality traits, about financial predators, about emotional grooming tactics. She didn't spiral. She studied. One night, about a month later, she sat across from me again at my kitchen table. "I keep thinking about the whisper," she said. "What whisper?" "At the engagement party. When I asked you to check him." She looked thoughtful. "I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew something wasn't right." I nodded. "Instinct is pattern recognition your brain hasn't consciously explained yet." She smiled slightly. "I almost ignored it. But you didn't." She stirred her tea slowly. "I think the worst part isn't that he wanted the money. What is it? That he studied us, our family, our history, like we were inventory. That hit me harder than the financial aspect ever did. Because she was right. The spreadsheet wasn't about dollars. It was about people reduced to columns. Value, access, timeline. I realized then that what we stopped wasn't just theft. It was dehumanization. Vanessa's sentencing came 6 months later. 5 years. Loss of professional license. Daniel's parents sold their house shortly after the trial. I don't know where they moved. I don't blame them for disappearing. Emily took 3 weeks off work after everything settled. She didn't travel. She didn't hide. She repainted her condo. She replaced the dining table they had chosen together. Small acts of reclamation. One Saturday, she removed every trace of him from the apartment. Photos, wine glasses he bought, the framed art piece he insisted matched their aesthetic. She placed everything in boxes. Not violently, just decisively. When she finished, she stood in the empty living room. "It feels lighter," she said. It was, because betrayal leaves residue, but exposure cleans it. The hardest part for me wasn't the investigation. It was watching my daughter recalibrate her belief system. Love had always been simple for her. Now it was layered, but not destroyed. That distinction matters. 6 months later, the river looked the same. That surprised me. Life-changing events don't rearrange geography. They rearrange people. Emily invited me to dinner at her condo one Friday night in early fall. Same building. Same view of the Hudson. Different energy. The walls were a softer color now. Warm gray instead of the cool white Daniel preferred. The dining table was solid oak. Heavy. Grounded. She cooked pasta. Nothing fancy. Garlic, olive oil, shrimp. A $14 bottle of wine instead of something curated to impress. We ate at the counter. "You know what's strange?" she said halfway through the meal. "What?" "I don't hate him." That caught me off guard. "You don't." She shook her head. "I'm angry at what he tried to do. I'm disgusted by the manipulation. But hate feels like giving him space in my head rent-free." I studied her for a moment. There was no tremor in her voice. No lingering romantic confusion. Just assessment. "That's healthy," I said. She smiled. Therapy helps. She'd returned to work 2 months earlier. Slowly, she volunteered with a legal aid group that assists victims of financial exploitation. Mostly elderly clients. Sometimes newly divorced women. Sometimes small business owners who trusted the wrong partner. She didn't advertise her experience. But when someone sat across from her and said, "I can't believe I didn't see it," she could answer honestly. Smart people get manipulated every day. That's something we don't say enough. Predators don't hunt the weak. They hunt the trusting. One evening, about a year after the arrest, Emily and I were walking along the river path. Leaves were falling. Air colder. The kind of crisp that sharpens thought. "Do you regret investigating him?" she asked suddenly.
No.
Even though it blew everything up? I looked out at the water. Especially because it blew everything up. She nodded. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd ignored that whisper. I did the math once in my head. Trust, $4.2 million. Projected business leverage. Maybe another $2 to $3 million accessible under emotional pressure. Real estate equity. Joint accounts. In less than 30 days, he could have drained years of family work. Not just money. Stability. Generational planning. Best case, I said. You lose a few million. Worst case. You lose yourself. She stopped walking. That's what scares me the most, she admitted. Not the money. The erosion. The slow convincing that merging everything was romantic. That questioning it meant I didn't trust him. That's the trick, I said. They redefine caution as betrayal. She exhaled slowly. I won't let that happen again. And I believed her. Not because she hardened, but because she sharpened. There's a difference. Hard people close off. Sharp people observe. About 14 months after the canceled wedding, she told me she'd started dating again. His name's Mark, she said casually. What does he do? I asked reflexively. She laughed. Relax, Dad. Public school history teacher. Drives a 10-year-old Honda. Good, I said. She rolled her eyes. I already background checked him. I blinked. You did. She nodded. Basic search. Court records. Social media. Nothing weird. And I told him I did it. And he said, smart. That was the moment I let go of the last tension I didn't realize I was holding. Because transparency doesn't scare honest people. It scares performers. A few weeks later, I met Mark. He was nervous, not polished. He didn't ask about trust structures or liquidity schedules. He asked about fishing. He asked about the company I built. Not how much it was worth, but how I survived 2008. He listened more than he talked. When he left, I said to Emily quietly, "He seems decent." She smiled. "He is." Then she added something that stayed with me. I'm not looking for someone to merge with immediately. I'm looking for someone to walk beside. There's wisdom you can't teach your children. They have to earn it. The legal case concluded fully 18 months after the arrest. Daniel began serving his sentence at a federal facility in Pennsylvania. Vanessa was transferred to a minimum security prison. Restitution payments will likely trickle in for years. It doesn't matter. We didn't pursue justice for money. We pursued it for boundaries. People sometimes ask me if I feel satisfied. Satisfied isn't the right word. Relieved, maybe. Grateful, definitely. Proud, absolutely. Proud that my daughter trusted her instinct. Proud that she didn't explode emotionally when she discovered the spreadsheet. Proud that she chose strategy over spectacle. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's protection. Protection of assets. Protection of dignity. Protection of self. Cold revenge doesn't shout. It documents. It waits. It calls the right professionals. It lets the law close the door. And then it walks forward. Emily once told me, I thought love meant vulnerability without conditions. She paused. Now I think love means openness with awareness. That's not cynicism. That's maturity. I'm older now. I've seen enough business betrayals to fill a book. But watching your child almost become inventory on someone else's spreadsheet, that hits differently. What I learned is simple. Trust your instincts. Verify quietly. Act strategically. And never confuse kindness with naivety. If someone studies your family like a balance sheet, let them. Just make sure you're the one auditing back. Sniffing. Life went on. The river kept flowing. And my daughter? She didn't lose faith in love. She just learned to read the fine print.